Please like and subscribe. I need YouTube to validate my existence. What's it gonna take to get you to like and subscribe? Do I have to drink Jules? 'Cause I'll drink Jules. I'll drink Jules all day. Jewel. Anyway, I'm looking on my phone today, got this article up about the risks of loot boxes. A study has been published in the July issue of Royal Society Open magazine, which talks about the startling risks associated with loot boxes, those gambling mechanics that the game industry tells us aren't gambling mechanics, even though they're gambling mechanics because they look and behave exactly like gambling, and they are gambling. They're gambling. They're gambling is what they are. Gambling. They're gambling. We would argue that regardless of the profitability of the loot box trade, the risks associated with them are worryingly high. According to this report, what I am doing a reading of, the risks with loot box spending and problem gambling are more than twice as strong as the relationship seen recently in a similarly recruited adult population. Now, any long-term viewers of this show will know that there are risks associated with aggressive monetization of video games. I've talked to the victims, I've talked to the targets, I've talked to the people that the game industry preys upon. I've published their stories, and it sickens me. The video game industry, the AAA mainstream video game industry, makes me sick to my tummy wummy wummy. Why do I have to undermine my own points by saying things like tummy wummy wummy? Anyway, that aside, let's talk about the video game industry's recent attempt to wallpaper over the cracks of the loot box debacle. As the loot boxes face a more and more credible criticism and the practice of in-game gambling comes under investigation across the world, the video game industry has revealed that major platform holders are working on policies that'll require more disclosure. In future, publishers will be required to reveal the odds of winning on their little premium poison boxes, with Nintendo, Sony and Microsoft all working together to enforce it. This announcement was made by the Entertainment Software Association, the game industry's trade association that specializes in lobbying, astroturfing, and incompetently leaking the personal information of thousands of E3 attendees. I'm pleased to announce this morning that Microsoft, Nintendo, and Sony have indicated to ESA a commitment to new platform policies with respect to the use of paid loot boxes in games that are developed for their platforms, said the ESA's Michael Warnock. Specifically, this would apply to new games and game updates that add loot box features, and it would require the disclosure of the relative rarity of probabilities of obtaining randomized virtual items in games that are available on their platforms. Policies are expected to go into effect by the end of 2020, and a number of major publishers have agreed to reveal their loot box odds by then. Such companies include Activision Blizzard, Bethesda, Bungie, Electronic Arts, Take-Two Interactive, Warner Brothers Interactive, Ubisoft, and others. A number of publishers have not thus far committed to comply, including Gearbox, Square Enix, Capcom, and THQ Nordic. But certainly in THQ Nordic's case, the company said it's never had loot boxes in its games and doesn't plan to implement them in future. The publishers who have pledged their commitment are certainly the ones notorious for exploiting gambling mechanics. Epic Games, for its part, has already been making changes, revealing the exact items found inside loot boxes in Fortnite Save the World, and promising to remove them entirely from Rocket League. That last move, the removal of them entirely from Rocket League, is the only move that's actually worth a shit. The ESA may now express how pleased it is to announce this extra transparency, but it's worth noting that it's come only after the Federal Trade Commission got involved. Amidst controversy and criticism surrounding the game industry's predatory business practices, the FTC promised it would start looking into loot boxes, which has borne fruit with a recent workshop titled Inside the Game: Unlocking the Consumer Issues Surrounding Loot Boxes. Here, the FTC learned about video game monetization prioritisation from a variety of academics and industry figures, and it was at this workshop where the ESA was so pleased to make its announcement. Before now, however, the ESA, which by the way recently doxed thousands of games media members, has been pretty adamant that in-game gambling mechanics aren't a problem. In November 2018, when the FTC first promised to look into loot boxes, the ESA preemptively rushed to their defense, seemingly way more protective of loot boxes than of people's private data.
Loot boxes are one way that players can enhance the experience that video games offer,
said the ESA at the time.
Contrary to assertions, loot boxes are not gambling. They have no real-world value. Players always receive something that enhances their experience, and they are entirely optional to purchase. They can enhance the experience for those who choose to use them, but have no impact on those who do not.
Just the same weak, tired, long-debunked excuses for loot boxes that game industry defenders have been peddling for years with no plan or stated intent to tackle them whatsoever. And yes, the ESA used enhance the experience that many times. Fucking cretins. Before then, the ESA was even more dismissive of concerns. In May of 2018, the trade association wrote off in-game gambling criticism as a mere overreaction, something it wasn't planning to take seriously at all.
In the US, loot boxes are not gambling for more than the reason I put here,
the ESA said, referencing the same tired old bullshit.
The other one is it's not converted to value in the world. It can only exist in the digital world.
Now that's the premise of Reboot.
That's the component that many of these definitions look at. There's not an exit path to turn that into something outside of the game. We have both of those reasons present, predominantly for loot boxes and in-game transactions around this industry. So going to the one or two isolated overreactions, seeing how those overreactions play to one or two governments, and then making that the standard and doing that industry-wide, that's not going to be productive for the industry or for gamers.
In this statement, the ESA, which cannot be trusted to protect your private data, also said that self-regulation was the only viable solution, adding,
"Let's inform first, continue to self-regulate, and move ahead that way. It's worked great for us over the last 20 years. That's the prescription we should use going forward."
Yeah, self-regulation has worked great for you over the last 20 years. For you and you alone, game industry. You see, self-regulation sounds great in theory, but in practice it only really works for the businesses doing the regulating. Expecting a corporation to effectively self-regulate is like expecting Jason Voorhees to say, "Oh, that's enough murdered teens for me tonight, thanks, I'm gonna have a sit-down and a sandwich." This shifty fucking industry has proven time and time again that it will do anything to make money if it can get away with it. It will indulge in any toxic business model, sink to any depth of avarice no matter how unethical, and will only stop after enough public outcry makes such behaviour untenable, something most clearly demonstrated with the backlash to Star Wars Battlefront 2. And the industry's own regulatory bodies are woefully, often deliberately, defeasible. The Entertainment Software Ratings Board is the game industry's self-regulation arm when it comes to appropriately age-rating content, and they have been just as dismissive as the ESA in the past, also using the same pitifully transparent excuses. Despite this, the ESRB did eventually try to cover the industry's tracks once the political climate around loot boxes got a bit too hot, by adding an in-game purchases content label for games containing loot boxes, microtransactions, and any other premium content purchasable within the software. It was an all-encompassing move, however, lumping together loot boxes with other, less gambling-oriented transactions. This obfuscating move was by design. The ESRB's stated reason for lumping all transactions together inadvertently betrayed the sneaky motive at play. "I'm sure you're all asking, why aren't we doing something more specific to loot boxes?" said ESRB President Patricia Vance. "We've done a lot of research over the past several weeks and months, particularly among parents. What we've learned is that a large majority of parents don't know what a loot box is. Even those who claim they do don't really understand what a loot box is. So it's very important for us to not harp on loot boxes per se, to make sure that we're capturing loot boxes, but also other in-game transactions." Quite how Vance thought this would make the ESRB look just
justified is beyond me, as it's basically the ESRB admitting they won't explain things to people who need that explanation the most. I mean, we're not explaining what loot boxes are because parents don't know what loot boxes are is a hell of a stance to take, but it effectively demonstrates exactly what the ESRB is doing, deliberately failing to effectively inform the public about in-game monetization, just offering a blanket label to cover the game industry's tracks and provide the appearance of regulation without doing anything of actual substance, note, or use. Very much like the ESA and its new loot box disclosures, the ESRB's in-game purchases label was only implemented after years of willful ignorance on the issue, of hand-waving concerns away until the political pressure got real enough that it was time to put on a show of proaction. And even with the ESRB going out of its way to protect publishers' interests, those very same game publishers are making a mockery of the effort. Thanks to post-launch microtransactions adding premium currencies weeks or months after launch, companies like Activision are getting their games rated without the appropriate warnings, totally undermining the very thing that was instituted to cover their asses. Activision gets to enjoy weeks of suckering customers into its economy before anyone realizes that's what's happening, and the ESRB ratings can't reflect it because the ESRB doesn't know it's coming either. They can only digitally re-rate it after the fact. And in the case of physical boxes, those already out there can't be amended. Crash Team Racing could be bought in a store right now, and the appropriate labeling isn't on the package, despite microtransactions getting added in. I cannot get over how fucking weaselly that is. The in-game purchases label was fucking designed to protect publisher interests, and they still can't help undermining it. Even with the ESRB looking out for them, they still can't see past their own greed-fueled short-term gains enough to consider for a moment maybe not fucking with the system that's designed to work in their favour. I mean, how addicted to being a sneaky rat fuck do you have to be? God dang it, Bobby! That and that alone demonstrates how woefully inefficient game industry self-regulation is. I'd almost call the regulation inept if I didn't suspect that it's doing exactly what it's meant to be doing, which is to say, not very much. EA was ahead of the curve on this one, revealing FIFA Ultimate Team prize odds as of 2018. The odds themselves showed just how brutally in favour of Electronic Arts they were, with the most desirable prizes having a less than 1% chance of dropping. But knowing the odds has never stopped people with spending addictions, problem gamblers, and it's never stopped children, the very people companies like EA have been making their money from. And EA will continue to unethically sucker money out of people with FIFA, which, by the by, is rated as suitable for young children, which leads to stories of kids cleaning out their parents' bank accounts, unless given more adult supervision than is needed for Wolfenstein. The fact that odds are disclosed has done jack squat for families impacted by the duplicitous nature of loot boxes. Unlike with sticker packs and trading cards, which the industry loves to compare to loot boxes, video games are constantly updated and publishers have 24/7 access to their end users. Odds can always be shifted. We already know that in-game purchases are fiddled with thanks to companies like Scientific Revenue, which uses tactics like dynamic pricing to alter digital storefronts on a per-player basis, all with the goal of psychologically manipulating people into spending money. Given the inherently raptorial nature of microtransactions, I am simply not one to trust the game industry here on any level. At what point have publishers ever done anything to deserve trust, especially by now when they fucked so many people over so many times over so many years? Moreover, odds can always be misrepresented. For example, in casinos, the common promise of a 95% slot machine payout can be misleading. Not all slot machines have the same odds of payout, with some paying out 95% and others paying out practically zero. The casino just takes a select sample of slot machines and uses them to arrive at its average chances of winning. That's just one way that odds can be misrepresented. But at least at a casino, when you win something, there's financial value. When you buy a Panini sticker pack or a collectible card game pack, you get a physical good that could be traded or sold. The industry loves to hide behind the fact that you can't benefit financially from a loot box prize. But what are they really admitting there? They're just saying that loot boxes are like gambling, but shit. And as I've said in the past, if I go to the Beau Rivage Casino, they've got that sweet crab buffet with that sweet buffet crab. I don't even need to have a go on the slot machines, I'll just head straight to the buffet and eat all that crab, thank you very much, all crab all nice up in my tummy. Sweet buffet crab is better than loot boxes. Every time. Playing Call of Duty has never once given me the sweet taste of crab. Instead, it just makes me feel like I've got crabs. Odds disclosure is wallpaper over a crack, a newspaper put down over a puddle of cat piss. It's the illusion of something being done without anything actually being done to address the fact that gambling is part of the AAA game experience now. If something were to actually solve the issue of loot boxes, EA, Activision, and their trash brethren would be fighting it, not pledging to comply with it for appearances. They've resisted any legitimate attempt at regulation in the past. And this self-regulatory grandstanding, that's just more resistance, swaddled in the sheep's clothing of compromise. Loot boxes are gambling. Gambling, but shittier. It's gambling and should be regulated as such. FIFA has zero business marketing itself toward kids, not when it needs such intense parental supervision. By the very strict legal definition of gambling in most countries, loot boxes are not. No, they're not. Technically gambling, but that's all it is. Game publishers are getting off on a technicality. That's what they're exploiting. Psychologically and mechanically, these things are not different from slot machines. And that's why you never see EA, Activision, the ESRB, or the ESA talk about the mechanical implementation of loot boxes or the psychological impressions they make. No, they sweep all that shit under the rug. They only stick to legal definitions, weak comparisons to sticker albums, or the disingenuous claim that it's all just optional. They do this because they know damn fucking well that loot boxes are comparable to gambling in every way except that strict technicality. And more than any other point, odds disclosure isn't enough for the simple fact that microtransactions of any stripe shouldn't be in a paid game to fucking begin with. That game publishers raking in billions of dollars off the back of predatory business models is wholly unethical, and that the very real harm these sneakily incremental purchases can inflict is fucking abominable. Loot box odds disclosure isn't enough because ultimately, premium loot boxes need to fuck off and die. The only regulation that matters is regulation that strangles the entire concept until it's nothing but a twitching goddamn corpse. Loot boxes are vile, they should be eradicated, the game industry has a clear gambling problem, and it cannot be trusted to regulate itself.
I realise not everyone takes me seriously when I go on my tangents. I mean, I don't know what about this whole setup isn't to be taken seriously, but for reals, people dismiss me as rambling and ranting and getting all angry over the video game industry, but I truly do mean it. I've said this in other videos. I said this in the addiction video that I really would like people to still share and put out there because of the testimonies in there and the research in there. It needs to be seen. And as I said there, I'll say it here. It's not an act when I get furious at the AAA game industry. I know I throw in little catchphrases and there's some humour in what we do. We like to have a laugh on the show where we can, a bit of levity, if you will. But that doesn't mean that I'm insincere. I'm genuinely concerned about what aggressive monetization has done to the game industry, to the quality of video games themselves, and more importantly, to the people they target. To the so-called whales, to problem gamblers, to people with spending, shopping addictions, people with compulsive personalities, just all the people that the video game industry is raking in tens of billions of dollars from. I used to stress a lot that I am not fully in favour of government regulation of the game industry, but it is quite clear by now that self-regulation is a crock of shit for the most part. It's something the industry wants to do to avoid scrutiny, to avoid accountability, to avoid taking responsibility for the harm that the industry is doing. And that can't carry on. And at this point, I just don't give a shit if the government steps in or not. The industry had its chance. It had multiple chances. And these are little things they're trying to do, the in-game warning labels that the industry is actually just ignoring and undermining. This new thing about loot box disclosure rods. It's a farce. It's a performance. It's grandstanding, and it means nothing. It's just the game industry trying to cover its own tracks so it can continue exploiting people, preying upon people, generally being a massive pile of wank. And at this point, if they do get slapped down, I won't weep for them. I won't even bother getting a tiny violin. They're not even worth that much. Thank God for me and all that, but more importantly, thank God for people who are still coming forward to me, telling me about their stories and their experiences with aggressive video game monetization and what it's done to them. I still have many more stories to share in that regard, and hopefully I'll get to do that soon. More testimonials or another Jimquisition. Who knows? I've got so much to share, and it's heartbreaking and despicable. And at some point, one day, the so-called AAA video game industry is going to have to answer for it. I've just noticed one of the jewels went into my actual water. I'm literally drinking jewels.